The rain hammered against the glass windows of the Velvet Room, a high-end nightclub nestled in the heart of Chicago's River North District. It was the kind of place where politicians shook hands with criminals, where champagne flowed freely, and where secrets were worth more than gold. The bass from the music below vibrated through the mahogany floors, a constant reminder that beneath the polished veneer, this was a kingdom built on blood and loyalty. Elena Moretti had worked at the Velvet Room for 3 years. At 28, she had perfected the art of being invisible. She wore her black uniform with the grace of someone who understood that in this world, being noticed could be dangerous. Her dark hair was always pulled back into a simple bun, her makeup minimal, her movements efficient. She poured drinks, cleared tables, and smiled when required, but never too much. Never enough to catch anyone's attention. The club was owned by Vince Costello, a name that carried weight not just in Chicago, but across the entire Midwest. The Costello family had controlled the city's underground for 3 generations. Drugs, gambling, protection rackets. If money moved through the shadows, the Costellos took their cut. Vince himself was rarely seen at the club. He had managers, enforcers, and accountants to handle the day-to-day operations. But everyone who worked there knew one thing. Nothing happened in the Velvet Room without his knowledge. Eleanor had seen things during her years there. Briefcases exchanged in dark corners, conversations that ended with handshakes and silent nods, men who arrived in expensive suits and left with blood on their knuckles. She had learned to look away, to forget faces, to never ask questions. It was survival. Tonight, the club was quieter than usual. The February cold had kept most of the regular crowd away, and by 1:30 a.m. only a handful of patrons remained. Eleanor wiped down the bar, her mind wandering to the small apartment she shared with her younger brother, Marco. He was 19, studying at community college, trying to build a life different from the one they'd grown up in. Their father had worked on the docks until a heart attack took him 5 years ago. Their mother had cleaned houses until arthritis made it impossible. Now it was just Elena and Marco, scraping by in a city that chewed up the vulnerable and spit them out. "Elena, you good to close up?" Tommy, the night manager, asked as he grabbed his coat from behind the bar. He was a stocky man in his 50s with a thick Brooklyn accent that never quite faded, even after 20 years in Chicago. "Yeah, I got it," Elena replied, offering a small smile. "Good. Lock up when you're done. And hey," Tommy paused, his expression serious. "If anyone shows up, anyone at all, you call me. Don't open the door, understood?" Elena nodded. She'd heard the rumors swirling through the staff for the past week. Something was wrong in the organization, whispers of betrayal, of federal investigations, of names being leaked to the authorities. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tommy left, and Elena was alone. She finished cleaning, her movements methodical. As she reached for her coat in the back office, she noticed something unusual. The door to Vince's private study, a room strictly off-limits to staff, was slightly ajar. A thin strip of light spilled into the hallway. Her heart quickened. No one should be in there. Tommy had been the last to leave, and he would never be careless enough to leave that door open. Eleanor approached slowly, her footsteps silent on the carpeted floor. She pushed the door open an inch more and peered inside. The study was pristine. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, shelves lined with books that had probably never been read, and a massive mahogany desk in the center. On that desk, illuminated by a single lamp, was a leather-bound ledger and several loose pages covered in handwritten names. Elena's breath caught. She recognized some of those names. Carlo Benedetti, a captain in the organization who'd been arrested last month. Frank DeLuca, an accountant who died in a car accident 2 weeks ago. Anthony Ricci disappeared without a trace. These weren't just names. These were dead men, traitors, informants, and someone had been compiling the list. Her hands trembled as she stepped into the room. She shouldn't be here, she should leave immediately. But something stopped her, a memory from 3 nights ago. She'd been closing up late, just like tonight, when she'd overheard a conversation. 2 men in expensive suits, voices low but urgent. "Vince has the list, he knows who talked." "How many?" 8 names, maybe more. "He's planning to clean house, every single one of them." "When?" "Soon. Very soon." Eleanor had hurried away before they could notice her, but the conversation had haunted her. 8 people, 8 lives, and now staring at the names on the desk, she realized the purge hadn't begun yet, but it would. These men had betrayed Vince, yes, But they also had families, children, wives who would wake up to empty beds and unanswered questions. Elena thought of Marco, of how hard he'd worked to stay clean, to stay away from the life that had consumed so many others. What if one day someone made a list with his name on it? What if survival meant becoming something unforgivable? Her hands moved before her mind could catch up. She grabbed the pages, her pulse racing, and walked to the stone fireplace against the far wall. A few embers still glowed from the fire Tommy must have started earlier in the evening. She knelt down, hands shaking, and fed the first page into the flames. It caught quickly, the edges curling and blackening. She added another, then another. The names disappeared into ash and smoke. Carlo Benedetti, Frank De Luca, Anthony Ricci. One by one, they burned. She didn't hear the door open behind her. "What the hell are you doing?" The voice was low, calm, and deadly. Elena froze. The last page slipped from her fingers into the fire as she turned slowly. Vincent Costello stood in the doorway. He was taller than she'd expected, 6'2", maybe 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was slicked back, streaked with just enough grey to suggest he was in his mid-40s, but it was his eyes that struck her most. Steel grey, sharp, and completely unreadable. This was a man who had killed. A man who had ordered deaths with the same ease most people ordered coffee, and she had just destroyed his list. Eleanor's mouth went dry. Her legs felt weak. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The only exit was blocked by the man who could end her life with a single word. "I asked you a question." Vince stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it, a warning. Elena forced herself to stand, though her knees nearly buckled. I was closing up. The door was open. You saw my private documents." He moved closer, his gaze dropping to the fireplace where the last fragments of paper turned to ash. "And you decided to burn them?" "Yes." The single word hung in the air. Vince's jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I know," Eleanor whispered. "Do you?" His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his composure. "Those were names. People who betrayed me. People who tried to destroy everything I've built, and you—" He stopped, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. "Who are you?" "Elena Moretti. I'm a waitress. I've worked here for 3 years." Vince's eyes narrowed. 3 years, and I've never seen you before." "That was the point," she said quietly. "In a place like this, it's safer to be invisible." He stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the calculations happening behind those grey eyes. He was deciding whether she lived or died, deciding whether she was brave or stupid, deciding what threat she posed. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you burn them?" Elena met his gaze, her fear giving way to something else, a strange, reckless courage born from the certainty that she was probably dead anyway. "Because I knew you wouldn't forgive them," she said, "and I still believe you can be more than this." The silence that followed was deafening. Vince's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Confusion? Anger? She couldn't tell. "You don't know anything about me," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "I know enough." Eleanor's voice was steadier now. "I know you've built an empire on fear. I know people die when you give the word. I know those names on that list were about to become bodies." She paused. "But I also know you're not just a monster. Monsters don't hesitate, and you're hesitating right now." Vince took another step closer. They were only a few feet apart now. Eleanor could smell his cologne. Expensive, subtle, and utterly at odds with the violence he represented. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met," he said quietly, "or the most foolish." "Maybe both." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, there and gone in an instant. Then his expression hardened again. "Those men betrayed me. They put my family at risk. They deserve what's coming to them." "Maybe," Elena said, "but their families don't. Their children don't. And somewhere deep down I don't think you believe they do either." Vince's hand moved to his jacket, and Elena's heart stopped. This was it. He was going to pull out a gun, and he pulled out a phone instead. He stared at it for a moment, then back at her. "You have no idea what you've done. I can't just forget those names. I need to know who talked. I need to protect what's mine." "Then find another way," Elena said. "One that doesn't add more bodies to Chicago's streets." Vince laughed in a short, bitter sound. "You talk like it's that simple. Like I can just walk away from 30 years of this life because a waitress asks me to. I'm not asking you to walk away, Eleanor said. I'm asking you to choose differently just this once. The rain continued to pound against the windows. The club was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerators behind the bar downstairs. Two people, strangers until moments ago, stood in a room filled with smoke and ash, the remnants of a list that could have ended 8 lives. Vince slipped his phone back into his jacket. You should leave, now, before I change my mind about letting you walk out of here. Eleanor didn't move. What are you going to do? That's none of your concern. It is now. She gestured to the fireplace. I made it my concern. Vince ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him seem almost human. You're either going to get yourself killed, or you're going to ruin me. I haven't decided which is worse. Maybe neither, Eleanor said softly. Maybe you'll just become someone different. Vince shook his head. Go home, Elena Moretti, and pray that I don't regret this conversation. Eleanor picked up her coat and walked toward the door. As she passed him, she paused. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think you're a monster. I think you're a man who's forgotten there's another way to be strong. She left before he could respond. Vince stood alone in his study, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. The rain continued to fall, and for the first time in years, Vincent Costello questioned the path he'd walked for so long. The invisible woman had seen him, and now he couldn't unsee himself. 3 days later, Eleanor hadn't slept properly since that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Vince's face. That moment of hesitation, the flicker of something almost human beneath the cold exterior. She'd expected consequences, a bullet, a warning, a body in the Chicago River, but nothing had happened. She'd shown up for her next shift at the Velvet Room expecting to be turned away, or worse. Instead, Tommy had greeted her normally, handing her the same section she always worked. The other staff treated her no differently. It was as if that night had never happened, except it had, and Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that she'd set something in motion, something she didn't fully understand. It was Thursday evening and the club was moderately busy. A jazz quartet played on the small stage in the corner, filling the space with smoky, melancholic notes. Elena moved through her tables with practiced efficiency, delivering cocktails and clearing empty glasses. She'd perfected the art of blending in, of being present but unremarkable. She was behind the bar, preparing a tray of drinks, when she felt it, that prickling sensation of being watched. She looked up. Vince was sitting in the VIP section on the upper level, his usual spot, but unlike other nights when she'd glimpsed him from afar, he was looking directly at her, her hand stilled on the cocktail shaker. He raised a hand, beckoning her over. Elena's pulse quickened. She glanced at Tommy, who was busy with the register, then set down the shaker and made her way upstairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. The VIP section was separated from the main floor by a burgundy velvet rope and a wall of privacy. 2 men in dark suits stood nearby, Vince's security. They stepped aside as she approached. Vince sat alone at a corner booth, a glass of whiskey in front of him. He wore a navy suit tonight, crisp white shirt, no tie. He looked tired, the kind of tired that went deeper than missing a night's sleep. Sit, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Elena hesitated. I'm working. Tommy knows you're up here. Sit. She slid into the booth, keeping her hands folded in her lap to stop them from trembling. Vince studied her for a long moment, his grey eyes unreadable. You haven't told anyone about the other night. It wasn't a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. No. Why not? Who would I tell? She met his gaze. And what would be the point? It wouldn't change anything. Vince took a slow sip of his whiskey. Most people in your position would have run, left the city, gone to the police. Instead, you showed up for your shift like nothing happened. What was I supposed to do? Elena asked. I have bills to pay, a brother to look after. Running doesn't change that. Your brother, Vince said. Marco, right? 19, studying computer science at Harold Washington College. Eleanor's blood ran cold. How do you... I make it my business to know about people who work for me, Vince interrupted, especially people who burn my property and lecture me about morality. Eleanor's jaw tightened. If you're threatening him... I'm not. Vince's voice was firm. I'm stating a fact. You have someone you care about, someone you're trying to protect. That makes you human. It also makes you vulnerable. Is that why you asked me up here? To remind me that you could hurt the people I love? No. Vince leaned back, his expression softening slightly. I asked you up here because I haven't been able to stop thinking about what you said. Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. What I said? That I could be more than this. He gestured vaguely at the club around them. That I don't have to keep walking the same path I've been on for 30 years. And? Elena asked carefully. Vince was silent for a moment, rolling the glass between his hands. Do you know how I got here? How I became this? Elena shook her head. My father ran this organization before me, Vince began, his voice low. He was a hard man, brutal. He believed in loyalty above all else, and he punished betrayal without mercy. I watched him order executions before I was old enough to shave. I watched him break men who crossed him, and I learned that in this world, you either inspire fear or you become a victim of it. He paused, taking another sip. When I was 25, someone betrayed my father. A man he trusted, a man he considered a brother. The feds raided 3 of our operations, seized millions of dollars, and arrested 17 people. My father went to prison for 12 years. He died there of a stroke when I was 30. Elena listened, saying nothing. Before he died, he told me one thing. Never let betrayal go unpunished. Never show mercy, because mercy is weakness, and weakness gets you killed. Vince's eyes met hers. So that's what I did. For 15 years I've followed that rule. I've built an empire. I've kept my family safe. And I've made sure that anyone who even thinks about crossing me knows exactly what will happen. And you think that makes you strong, Elena said quietly. Doesn't it? Vince challenged. I'm still here, still in control, still alive. How many people in this business can say that? But are you happy? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He set down his glass, his expression flickering. Happiness isn't the goal. Survival is. That's not a life, Elena said. That's just existing. Vince laughed bitterly. You sound like my daughter. Elena's eyebrows rose. You have a daughter. Had. The word came out heavy. She was 16 when she told me she couldn't stand what I'd become, said she couldn't live in a house built on blood money. She left 6 years ago. I haven't seen her since. The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. For a moment, the mask slipped, and Eleanor saw not a mob boss, but a father who'd lost his child. Have you tried to reach out to her? Elena asked gently. Twice. She made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me. Vince's jaw tightened. She was right to leave. I couldn't protect her from what I am. What you are, Elena said, isn't set in stone. People change. They make different choices. Not people like me. Why not? Vince looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to understand how she could be so naive and yet so certain. Because I have too much blood on my hands, too many enemies, too many people depending on me to keep them safe. I can't just walk away. I'm not asking you to walk away, Elena said. I'm asking you to find a different way forward, one that doesn't require adding more names to that list. You mean the list you destroyed? There was no anger in his tone, only a weary resignation. Yes. Vince was quiet for a long time. The jazz quartet downstairs transitioned into a slow, haunting rendition of Georgia on My Mind. The sounds of conversation and clinking glasses drifted up from below. Do you know what happened to those men? Vince asked finally. The ones on the list? Elena's heart clenched. No. I made some calls. Had my people look into the situations more carefully. He paused. Turns out not all of them were guilty. Some were set up, framed by people who wanted to create chaos in the organization. Elena felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. So you didn't... I didn't kill them, Vince confirmed. Not yet, anyway, but I also didn't clear their names. They're still living under the suspicion, still looking over their shoulders. That's not right. No, Vince agreed. It's not. But it's complicated. If I publicly clear them, I look weak. Like I can't trust my own intelligence. If I punish them without being sure, I could be killing innocent men. And if I do nothing... He trailed off. You stay trapped in the same cycle, Eleanor finished. Exactly. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. What if you investigated further? Quietly. Found out who actually betrayed you and cleared the others. You'd still maintain your strength, but you wouldn't be punishing innocent people. Vince raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting I show discretion, nuance. I'm suggesting you show wisdom. He smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. You're a strange woman, Elena Moretti. Most people who work here don't look me in the eye, let alone tell me how to run my organization. I'm not trying to run anything, Elena said. I'm just trying to remind you that you have a choice. We always have a choice. Vince's smile faded, replaced by something more contemplative. My daughter said something similar. She told me that every day I chose to keep doing what I was doing, that I couldn't blame circumstances or my father or the world. It was my choice. She sounds smart. She is. His voice softened. She wanted to be a lawyer, help people. I told her she was naive, that the world doesn't work the way she thought it did. He shook his head. She proved me wrong by walking away. She chose differently. It's not too late for you to do the same, Elena said. Vince looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his jacket. Elena tensed, but he pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table. It was a picture of a young woman with dark hair and Vince's grey eyes. She was smiling, wearing a graduation cap and gown, looking hopeful and bright. That's Sophia, Vince said, taken the day before she left. She'd just finished high school early, got accepted to Northwestern. Full scholarship. Pride and pain warred in his expression. I wanted to throw her a party. She said she couldn't celebrate anything connected to my money. Eleanor looked at the photo, then back at Vince. Have you told her you're proud of her? How can I? She won't take my calls. Write her a letter. Vince blinked. What? Write her a letter, Eleanor repeated. Tell her you're proud of her. That you think about her. That you're trying to be better. You don't need her to answer, you just need her to know. Vince stared at the photograph, his fingers brushing the edge of the frame. What if she throws it away? Then at least you tried. That's more than doing nothing. The jazz quartet finished their song and a smattering of applause rose from the crowd below. Vince pocketed the photograph and stood. You should get back to work, he said, his tone formal once more. Elena stood as well. Does this mean you're not going to kill me? Vince's lips quirked. That depends. Are you planning to burn any more of my documents? Only if I think you're about to do something terrible. He shook his head, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. You're either going to save me or ruin me, Elena Moretti. I haven't decided which. Maybe both, Elena said, echoing his words from before. As she turned to leave, Vince called out, Elena. She looked back. Thank you, he said quietly, for not being invisible. Eleanor nodded and made her way back downstairs, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Behind her, Vince sat alone in the VIP section, staring at nothing. The weight of 30 years pressed down on him, heavy and familiar, but for the first time he wondered if there was a way to set that weight down. Not all at once, but piece by piece, choice by choice. The invisible woman had given him something he hadn't had in years, hope, and it terrified him. But perhaps, he thought, terror wasn't always a bad thing. Perhaps it meant he was still capable of change. Perhaps it meant he was still human. 2 weeks later, Chicago in March was unforgiving. The winter hadn't quite released its grip on the city, and a bitter wind swept through the streets, carrying with it the promise of one last snowstorm before spring could truly arrive. The sky was a slate grey, heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the city's towering buildings. Elena pulled her coat tighter as she walked the 3 blocks from the bus stop to the Velvet Room. It was 4 p.m., earlier than her usual shift, but Tommy had called her in to help with inventory. She didn't mind. The extra hours meant extra money, and Marco's tuition payment was due next month. As she approached the club's side entrance, she noticed something unusual. 2 black SUVs were parked in the alley, the kind with tinted windows and an unmistakable air of authority. Federal agents. Elena's stomach dropped. She kept walking, trying to appear casual, but her mind raced. Had they come for Vince? Had someone talked? Was this connected to the list she'd burned? She entered through the staff door, and the moment she stepped inside, she knew something was very wrong. The club was silent. No music, no sounds of preparation for the evening shift. Just voices, sharp official voices, coming from upstairs. Tommy appeared from the storage room, his face pale. Elena, you shouldn't be here. What's happening? FBI. They showed up an hour ago with a warrant. They're searching Vince's office. Elena's heart hammered. Is he here? Yeah, and he's... Tommy shook his head. Let's just say this isn't good. You should go home. Come back tomorrow when this blows over. But Elena didn't leave. Instead, she set down her bag and moved toward the stairs. Elena, don't... She ignored him. Upstairs, the VIP section had been transformed into a crime scene. 4 FBI agents moved through Vince's study with methodical precision, photographing documents, bagging evidence, examining every inch of the room. 2 more agents stood by the door, blocking access. Vince stood near the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carefully neutral. But Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Next to him stood a man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit. Michael Brennan, Vince's lawyer. Special Agent Sarah Chen, a woman in her early 40s with sharp features and sharper eyes, was speaking. "Mr. Costello, we have reliable information that you've been running an illegal gambling operation out of this establishment. We also have reason to believe you've been laundering money through several downtown businesses." "My client has no comment at this time," Brennan interjected smoothly. "Of course he doesn't," Chen said, her tone dry. "But I'll tell you what we do have, Mr. Costello. We have witness testimony, we have financial records, and we have a cooperating witness who's willing to testify that you personally ordered." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Elena standing near the entrance. "Who are you?" Chen asked sharply. "She's an employee," Vince said before Elena could respond. His eyes met hers, and there was a warning in them. "Don't say anything." "Then she needs to leave," Chen said. "This is an active federal investigation." Elena didn't move. "Is Mr. Costello under arrest?" Chen's eyes narrowed. "Not at this time, but he will be answering questions at our field office." "Voluntarily," Brennan added quickly. "My client is cooperating fully." Elena looked at Vince again. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. She understood. He was handling this. She needed to stay out of it, but everything in her wanted to do something, to say something, to stop this from spiraling. "Elena," Vince's voice was firm. "Go home." This time she listened. Elena didn't go home. She went to a coffee shop 2 blocks away and waited. The hours crawled by. She ordered cup after cup of coffee she didn't drink, watching the clock and fighting the urge to call someone, though she didn't know who. Marco was in class. Tommy was at the club dealing with the aftermath. And Vince? Vince was at the FBI field office, facing questions she couldn't begin to imagine. It was nearly 9 p.m. when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered. "Hello? It's me." Vince's voice was low, tired. "Are you okay? Did they—" "I'm fine. They asked questions I didn't answer. Brennan earned his retainer today." He paused. "Where are you?" "Cafe Umbria, on Franklin." "Stay there. I'm sending a car." "Vince, you don't have to—" "10 minutes." He hung up. Exactly 10 minutes later, a sleek black sedan pulled up outside the cafe. The driver, a stoic man in his 30s, held the door open for her. Eleanor hesitated, then got in. They drove through the city in silence, the streets slick with a light rain that had begun to fall. The driver took her not to the Velvet Room, but to a neighborhood she didn't recognize. Lincoln Park, she realized, one of the city's most affluent areas. Tree-lined streets, historic brownstones, a world away from the South Side apartment she shared with Marco. The car stopped in front of a 3-story grey stone townhouse. Warm light glowed from the windows. "Mr. Costello is waiting inside," the driver said, the first words he'd spoken. Elena climbed the steps and the front door opened before she could knock. Vince stood there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "Come in," he said. The interior was sophisticated but not ostentatious. Hardwood floors, muted colors, carefully chosen furniture that spoke of taste rather than wealth. This was a home, Elena realized, not a showpiece. Vince led her to a study lined with bookshelves. A fire crackled in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon and handed her one. "I don't usually drink," Elena said. "Tonight might be a good time to start." She took the glass. Vince sank into a leather chair, rubbing his face with both hands. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "They're building a case," he said finally. "Chen's been after me for 2 years. She's got cooperating witnesses, financial forensics, surveillance. She's not going to stop until she puts me away." "What did they ask you?" "Everything. About the club, about my associates, about transactions going back 5 years, about the names on that list." He looked at her. "The one you burned." Eleanor's chest tightened. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things worse." "You didn't." Vince took a long drink. "Actually, you might have saved me. If that list still existed, Chen would have it now. She'd use it to flip those men, promise them immunity in exchange for testimony. As it is, She has nothing concrete connecting me to them. So burning it helped? In the short term, yes. In the long term? He shook his head. I don't know. The FBI doesn't need physical evidence anymore. They have informants, digital trails, patterns. They're patient. They'll build their case brick by brick. What are you going to do? Vince was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Brennan wants me to consider a deal. Cooperate with the investigation, provide information on higher-level connections, take a reduced sentence. Would you do that? A year ago? Never. Cooperation is death in my world. You flip, you sign your own execution warrant. Every enemy I've ever made would come for me, my family, everyone I care about. He paused. But now, Elena prompted gently. Now I wonder if dying on principle is worth it. If maintaining this empire is worth losing everything else. He looked at her. You made me question that. You and what you said that night. Elena set down her glass, untouched. I never meant to put you in this position. You didn't. I put myself here. 30 years of choices, each one leading to the next, until I couldn't see any other path. Vince stood, walking to the window. Rain streaked down the glass. I wrote that letter, the one to Sophia. Eleanor's heart lifted. You did. 2 days ago, told her everything I should have said 6 years ago, that I was proud of her, that I was sorry, that I understood why she left. His voice grew rough, that I wished I could be the father she deserved. Did you send it? Yes. He turned to face her. No response yet. Maybe there won't be one. But you were right, at least I tried. Eleanor stood as well, moving closer. That took courage, or desperation. A bitter smile crossed his face. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Vince! The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Both of them spun toward the window. The rain-soaked street outside was suddenly alive with movement, figures in dark clothing, the glint of metal, shouts cutting through the night. Vince grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her away from the window. Get down! Before she could process what was happening, the front door exploded inward. 3 men rushed in, guns drawn. They weren't FBI. Their faces were covered, their movements too chaotic, too violent. Where is he? One of them shouted. Where's Costello? Vince pushed Elena toward the back hallway. Run, now! I'm not leaving! Run! The authority in his voice left no room for argument. Elena stumbled backward as Vince moved to intercept the intruders, grabbing a heavy lamp from the side table and swinging it at the nearest man. The chaos that followed was brutal and quick. Vince fought like someone who'd been trained for violence his entire life. Efficient, ruthless, desperate. He took down one man, then another, but the third had a gun leveled at his chest. Marconi sends his regards, the gunman snarled. Eleanor didn't think. She grabbed a fireplace poker and swung it with all her strength, catching the gunman across the shoulder. He roared in pain, the gun discharging into the ceiling as he spun toward her. Everything went white-hot with terror and adrenaline. Vince tackled the man before he could fire again, and they crashed to the floor. The sound of sirens grew louder outside. Someone had called the police. The 2 remaining attackers fled through the shattered front door, leaving behind their unconscious companion. Vince stood slowly, breathing hard, blood dripping from a cut above his eyebrow. He looked at Elena, who still held the fireplace poker in trembling hands. Are you insane? He demanded. You could have been killed. So could you. They stared at each other, the adrenaline slowly giving way to the realization of what had just happened. Who was that? Elena asked, her voice shaking. Marconi's crew, a rival family out of Detroit. They've been trying to move into Chicago for months. Vince grabbed a towel from the kitchen, pressing it to his forehead. They must have heard about the FBI investigation and decided to make their move while I'm vulnerable. The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights flashed through the broken windows. We need to get our story straight, Vince said quickly. Home invasion. Random attack. You were here for a work meeting, that's all you say, understood? Elena nodded, still clutching the poker. The police burst through the door, guns drawn, shouting commands. Elena dropped the poker, raising her hands. Vince did the same. As they were separated for questioning, Eleanor caught Vince's eye one last time. In that look was something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. She'd stepped into his world tonight, and there was no stepping back. Later that night, it was nearly 3:01 a.m. by the time the police finished their questioning. Eleanor sat in a cold interrogation room at the 18th District Station, exhausted and shaken, repeating the same story over and over. She'd been at Vince's house for a work meeting. Men broke in. She defended herself. That was it. The detective, a grizzled man in his 50s named Morrison, didn't believe her, but he couldn't prove otherwise. "You know what kind of man Vincent Costello is?" Morrison asked, leaning back in his chair. "He's my employer," Elena said. "He's a criminal, a dangerous man. People around him tend to get hurt." "Then it's lucky I was there to help him," Elena said evenly. Morrison studied her. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Miss Moretti. I can't figure out which. Can I go home now?" He sighed. "Yeah, but let me give you some advice. Stay away from Vince Costello. Whatever you think you're doing, whatever you think you're helping with, it's not worth your life." Elena stood. "Thank you for the advice, detective." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. Elena found Vince waiting by a car, Brennan beside him. The lawyer was on his phone, speaking in urgent, clipped tones. Vince's forehead had been bandaged, and he looked as exhausted as she felt. "You okay?" he asked. "I should be asking you that. I've had worse nights." He gestured to the car. "Come on, I'll take you home." They drove through the empty city in silence. The skyscrapers loomed overhead, dark and imposing. Chicago at night was a different creature, beautiful and lonely, and somehow more honest than in daylight. "I'm sorry," Vince said finally. "I never should have brought you to my house. I put you in danger. You didn't know they were coming. I should have. Marconi's been circling for weeks. I was distracted, sloppy." He glanced at her. "You saved my life tonight. You know that, right?" Elena hadn't thought of it that way. It had all happened so fast. "You saved mine, too. That's my job. I brought you into this world. It's my responsibility to keep you safe. I chose to step into it," Elena said quietly. "No one forced me to burn that list. No one forced me to come to your house tonight. Why did you come?" Elena thought about the question. "Because I wanted to know you were okay. Because I—" She trailed off, uncertain how to finish. "Because you care," Vince finished for her. "Even though you know what I am, what I've done. I care because I see who you could be," Elena said. "Not despite what you've done, but because I believe you want to be better." Vince pulled up outside her apartment building, a modest 3-story walk-up in Bridgeport. The lights were off in her unit. Marco was asleep. "Elena." Vince turned to face her fully. "What happened tonight changes things. Marconi knows you're connected to me now. They might come after you to get to me." Fear flickered through her, but she pushed it down. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to quit the Velvet Room. Leave Chicago if you can. Take your brother and go somewhere safe." "No." "Elena." "No," she repeated more firmly. "I'm not running. I'm not abandoning you when you're trying to change. That's not who I am." "Then you're a fool." "Maybe." She opened the car door. "But I'm a fool who believes in you. And right now I think you need that more than you need me to be safe." She stepped out into the night, and Vince watched her disappear into her building. Alone in the car, he sat in the darkness, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Elena Moretti had walked into his life like a storm, unexpected, disruptive, and impossible to ignore. She'd seen past the armor he'd spent decades building, seen the man beneath the monster. And now, because of him, she was in danger. Vince made a decision in that moment. If he was going to protect her, if he was going to protect anyone, he needed to do more than just question his path. He needed to change it. Tomorrow, he would make a call, one that would alter everything. For Elena, for Sophia, for the man he still hoped he could become. The rain began to fall again, soft and steady, washing the streets clean. 1 month later, April in Chicago brought the city back to life. The brutal cold retreated, replaced by tentative warmth, and the first green shoots pushing through the soil in parks and gardens. The trees lining Michigan Avenue began to bud, and people emerged from their winter hibernation, filling sidewalk cafes and riverwalks with the energy of renewal. For Vince Costello, renewal came with a price. Elena sat in a booth at Lou Mitchell's, a classic diner near Union Station, watching the morning crowd drift in and out. Truck drivers, commuters, tourists, all of them oblivious to the fact that at a corner table, a life was being fundamentally altered. Vince sat across from Special Agent Sarah Chen and her partner, Agent Michael Torres. The meeting had been Brennan's idea, facilitated through weeks of careful negotiation. Vince wasn't wearing a wire. He wasn't providing names, but he was, for the first time in his life, cooperating. Elena couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read the tension in Vince's shoulders. the careful control in his expression. This was a man walking a tightrope between two worlds, the one he'd built and the one he was trying to reach. 20 minutes later, Jen and Torres stood, shook hands with Vince, a gesture that seemed to surprise everyone, and left. Vince remained seated for a moment, staring at his untouched coffee. Then he looked up and saw Elena. He gestured her over. She slid into the booth across from him. "How did it go?" she asked. "I gave them information about Marconi's operations, trafficking routes, money laundering fronts, key players. Nothing that directly implicates my own organization, but enough to help the FBI build their case against Marconi. Will it be enough? To keep me out of prison? Maybe. To make me a target? Definitely." Vince rubbed his eyes. "But Brennan thinks if I continue cooperating, show that I'm actively dismantling my illegal operations, the DOJ might offer a deal. Community service, heavy fines, probation. No jail time." Eleanor felt a surge of hope. "That's good news." "Is it?" Vince's voice was heavy. "I'm dismantling an empire I spent my entire adult life building. I'm betraying people who trusted me. Even if I don't name names, they'll know. They'll see the Marconi arrests and put it together." "But you're choosing a different path," Elena said. "That matters." "Does it?" Vince looked at her, and she saw the vulnerability there, the fear, the doubt, the weight of consequences. "I've made so many wrong choices, Elena, hurt so many people. How do I come back from that? How do I deserve redemption?" Elena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. The gesture was spontaneous, intimate. "You don't have to deserve it. You just have to choose it every day, every decision." Vince looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. "When did you become so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just someone who believes people can change, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." They sat like that for a moment, the diner bustling around them, two people finding something unexpected in each other, connection, hope, possibility. Vince's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire expression changed. "What is it?" Elena asked. He turned the phone toward her. An email. From an address he'd clearly saved, sophiacostelloeggmail.com. The subject line read, "Thank you for the letter." Vince's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "Dad, I got your letter. I've read it probably 20 times now. I don't know what to say, so I'll just be honest. I'm angry. I'm angry that it took you this long. I'm angry that you let your world become more important than me. I'm angry that I had to leave for you to see what you were doing. But I'm also proud. Proud that you wrote to me. Proud that you're trying to change. I don't know if it's too late for us. I don't know if I can trust this, but I'm willing to talk. If you're serious about being different, I want to see it. I'm in Chicago this weekend for a friend's wedding. If you want to meet for coffee, let me know. No promises. Just coffee." Sophia. Vince read the email 3 times, his eyes glistening. When he finally looked up at Eleanor, she saw something she'd never seen before in his face. Pure, unguarded joy. "She wants to meet," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "She's giving me a chance." Eleanor smiled, her own eyes stinging with tears. "That's wonderful. I don't know what to say to her. What if I mess it up? What if—" "You won't," Eleanor interrupted. "You'll tell her the truth. You'll show her who you're becoming, and you'll let her decide." Vince nodded slowly, processing. Then he started typing a response. Saturday afternoon. The coffee shop was small and quiet, tucked into a side street in Wicker Park. Vince arrived 20 minutes early, too nervous to wait at home. He'd changed his outfit 3 times, finally settling on jeans and a simple button-down. Casual, approachable, nothing that screamed mob boss. Eleanor had offered to come with him for moral support, but he'd declined. This was something he needed to do alone. At exactly 2:00 p.m., the door opened and Sophia walked in. She was taller than he remembered, her dark hair longer, pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a leather jacket over a sundress, and she had her mother's smile, guarded but warm. She was 22 now, no longer the angry 16-year-old who'd walked out of his life. She was a woman, strong, independent, whole. Vince stood, his heart hammering. "Sophia, Dad." She approached slowly, evaluating him with those sharp grey eyes she'd inherited from him. "You look different. I feel different." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, then Sophia gestured to the table. "Should we sit?" They ordered coffee. She got a latte. He got black coffee he knew he wouldn't drink, and sat across from each other, the space between them filled with 6 years of hurt and silence. "Thank you for coming," Vince said finally. "I almost didn't." Sophia wrapped her hands around her cup. "But your letter, it wasn't what I expected. It sounded like you. The real you, not the person you pretend to be. I'm trying to find my way back to that person," Vince said. "It's harder than I thought it would be." "Good," Sophia said. "If it was easy, it wouldn't mean anything." Vince smiled despite himself. "You sound like someone I know." "The woman you mentioned in your letter? Eleanor?" Vince nodded. "She works at the club. She's made me see things differently, made me question choices I thought were set in stone." Sophia studied him. "Are you in love with her?" The question caught him off guard. I don't know, maybe it's complicated." "Love usually is." Sophia took a sip of her latte. "Tell me about her." So Vince did. He told Sophia about the night Elena burned the list, about their conversations, about how she'd stood up to him when no one else would. He told her about the home invasion, about Elena's courage, about how she'd made him want to be better. Sophia listened, really listened, and when he finished, she said, "She sounds like Mom." Vince blinked. "What? Mom? Before everything?" Sophia's voice softened. "She was brave like that. She believed in you even when you didn't deserve it. She tried to pull you back from the edge for years. I think she finally gave up when I was 12. The mention of his ex-wife, Sophia's mother, Maria, brought a wave of old pain. Their divorce had been bitter, final. Maria had moved to Phoenix, remarried, built a new life far from Chicago's shadows. "Your mother was stronger than I ever gave her credit for," Vince said quietly. "She was, and she's happy now. Actually happy." Sophia met his eyes. "I want that for you too, Dad. I want you to be happy, but not if it means more people getting hurt." "I'm working on that," Vince said. "I'm cooperating with the FBI, dismantling the illegal operations. Dad's going to take time, but I'm committed." "Why now?" Sophia asked. "What changed?" Vince thought about the question. "I realized I was living in a prison of my own making. I thought I was powerful, but I was just trapped by my father's legacy, by my own choices, by fear." He paused. "Elena showed me that I didn't have to stay trapped, that I could choose differently." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad, for trying. That's more than I thought I'd ever be able to say." Vince's throat tightened. "I don't deserve your pride. Maybe not yet, but maybe someday you will." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not ready to jump back into your life. I need to see that this is real, that you're really changing, but I'm willing to keep talking, to take it slow. That's all I'm asking for," Vince said. "A chance." They talked for another hour, catching up on 6 years of missed life. Sophia told him about Northwestern, about her plans to apply to law school, about the internship she'd landed with a civil rights organization. Vince listened, asking questions, marveling at the woman she'd become. When they finally parted on the sidewalk outside, Sophia hugged him, brief but genuine. "Text me next week," she said. "Let me know how things are going." "I will." She started to walk away, then turned back. "Dad? That woman, Eleanor, don't let her go. People like that are rare." Then she was gone, disappearing into the spring afternoon. Vince stood on the sidewalk, the Chicago sun warm on his face, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, lightness, as if a weight had been lifted, even just a little. He pulled out his phone and called Elena. She answered on the second ring. "How did it go?" "She came, we talked. She's willing to give me a chance." Eleanor's joy came through the phone like sunshine. "Vince, that's incredible. I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "You pushed me, believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You did the hard part, you made the choice." "Eleanor," Vince hesitated, then pushed forward. "Would you have dinner with me? Not as an employee, not as someone helping me change, just as you." There was a pause. Then, "Like a date?" "Yes, like a date." Another pause. Vince held his breath. "Okay," Elena said softly. "Yes. Tonight?" "Tonight." That evening the restaurant was intimate, a small Italian place in Little Italy, far from the velvet room and the world it represented. Candlelight flickered on white tablecloths, and the smell of garlic and fresh bread filled the air. Eleanor arrived wearing a simple blue dress, her hair down for once, and Vince thought she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. They talked over dinner, really talked, Not about the FBI or the organization or the past, but about themselves. Elena told him about growing up with Marco, about her dreams of going to nursing school before her father died, and finances became impossible, about how she wanted to help people, to make a difference. Vince told her about his childhood, about the fear and violence that shaped him, about the moment he realized he could never be what his father wanted, and how that realization had both freed and trapped him. "Do you think you can fully get out?" Elena asked, swirling her wine. "Walk away completely?" "I don't know," Vince admitted. "Brennan's drawing up papers to transfer ownership of the Velvet Room to legitimate investors. I'm selling properties, liquidating assets. But the relationships, the history, that's harder to walk away from. What about the people who worked for you, the ones who depend on you?" "That's what keeps me up at night," Vince said. "I built an empire on the backs of people who trusted me. Now I'm dismantling it, and they're going to pay the price. Some will adapt, some won't. Some will see me as a traitor." "You're not a traitor. You're someone choosing a different path." "That's a kind way of saying it." Elena leaned forward. "Vince, redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about not letting the past define your future. You can't undo what you've done, but you can do better going forward. That's all any of us can do." Vince reached across the table, taking her hand. "How did I get so lucky to have you walk into my life?" "I think I walked into your study and burned your property," Elena said with a small smile. He laughed, a genuine, full laugh. "Best mistake anyone ever made." They finished dinner and walked along the Chicago River, the city lights reflecting on the water like scattered diamonds. The air was warm, promising summer, promising new beginnings. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said as they paused on the river walk. "Anything. Why me? Why did my opinion matter when you've had people around you your whole life?" Vince thought about the question. "Because you had nothing to gain. Everyone else wanted something from me. Power, protection, money. But you just wanted me to be better. Not for you, for me, for my soul." He turned to face her fully. "You saw me, Elena, the real me, and you didn't look away." Elena's eyes shimmered in the city lights. "I see you, Vince. And I believe in you." He kissed her then, soft and tentative, a question more than a declaration. She answered by kissing him back, her hands coming up to his face, holding him close. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Vince rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "I don't know how to be this person, the one who deserves someone like you." "Then we'll figure it out together," Elena said. "One choice at a time." 3 months later, summer came to Chicago in full force, turning the city into a vibrant tapestry of outdoor concerts, festivals, and tourists crowding Navy Pier. The Velvet Room had been sold to a legitimate hospitality group, and Vince's cooperation with the FBI had resulted in the successful dismantling of Marconi's operations. 27 arrests, millions in seized assets, and a significant blow to organized crime in the Midwest. The DOJ had offered Vince a deal: 5 years probation, substantial fines, and community service. No jail time, but a permanent record. Vince had accepted. Eleanor sat on the steps of Vince's brownstone, watching Marco help Vince install a new front door. The old one still showed signs of that violent night in March. The two men worked well together, Marco providing tech advice on smart locks, while Vince handled the physical installation. It had taken some convincing for Marco to accept Vince, but seeing his sister happy had been enough. Plus, Vince had quietly paid off Marco's tuition for the next 2 years, a gesture Eleanor had only discovered by accident. "You know," Marco said, stepping back to admire their work, "for a former mob boss, you're pretty decent with a drill." Vince snorted. "Former mob boss? I'll never get used to hearing that." "Better than current mob boss," Marco pointed out. "Fair point." Elena smiled, watching them. In the past 3 months, Vince had transformed his life piece by piece. He'd started working with Sophia's civil rights organization, using his knowledge of criminal networks to help them advocate for justice system reform. He'd reached out to families affected by his organization's violence, offering what reparations he could. He'd started seeing a therapist to work through decades of trauma and choices. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. There were still threats from rival families, still FBI check-ins, still moments when the weight of his past threatened to pull him under. But he was trying, genuinely, consistently trying. Sophia visited twice a month now, and while their relationship was still healing, it was healing. She'd even brought her boyfriend to meet Vince last week. a law student named David, who was brave enough to shake hands with a former crime boss and smart enough not to ask too many questions. "Elena!" Marco called. "Food's here!" A delivery driver stood at the gate with bags from their favorite Thai restaurant. Elena jogged down to grab it, and they all settled on the brownstone's front steps to eat, watching the neighborhood come alive with evening activity. "I got an email today," Vince said between bites of pad thai, "from the community center in Bridgeport. They want me to speak to at-risk youth about making better choices." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. What do I say?" "Hi kids, I was a violent criminal for 30 years, but now I'm reformed." "You say that you made mistakes," Elena said, "that choices have consequences, that it's never too late to change course." "That would mean a lot coming from someone who lived it." Vince considered this. "You really think I have something to offer them?" "I think you have everything to offer them. You're living proof that people can change." Marco nodded. "She's right. You're like the ultimate redemption story. Way better than those reality TV shows." Vince laughed. "High praise from a 19-year-old. I'm 20 now," Marco corrected. "And I still can't believe my sister is dating a former Mafia boss. It's like something out of a movie." "The world's strangest rom-com," Eleanor agreed. "Speaking of which," Vince said, his tone shifting to something more serious. He set down his food and turned to Eleanor. "I've been thinking about the future, about what I want it to look like." Elena's heart quickened. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Elena's breath caught. Marco's eyes went wide. "Now, before you panic," Vince said quickly, "I know it's only been a few months. I know we're still figuring things out. This isn't a proposal. Not yet." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small flame. "It's to remind you," Vince said softly, "that you set fire to my old life, and from those ashes we're building something new. Together." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Vince, I love you, Elena Moretti. I don't know if I deserve you. I probably don't, but I promise I will spend every day trying to be the man you believe I can be." Elena threw her arms around him, and Marco diplomatically looked away, suddenly very interested in his phone. "I love you too," Elena whispered into Vince's shoulder. "And you're already that man. You just have to keep choosing to be." They sat like that as the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city that had witnessed so much darkness was bathed in light. And in that moment, surrounded by the people he'd come to care about, Vince Costello felt something he'd thought was lost forever: hope. 6 months later, winter. The December cold had returned to Chicago, but this time it felt different, cleaner somehow. Vince stood outside the community center in Bridgeport, Elena beside him, preparing for his third speaking engagement with at-risk youth. "Nervous?" Elena asked, adjusting his collar. "Terrified," Vince admitted. "These kids are tough. They see through bullshit instantly." "Then don't give them bullshit. Give them truth." Vince kissed her forehead. "When did you become so wise?" "I had a good teacher." They walked inside together, hand in hand. The community center was warm and bright, filled with teenagers who looked equal parts skeptical and curious. Sophia was there too, having helped organize the event through her organization. She waved from the front row. Vince took the small stage, looking out at the sea of young faces. He thought about who he'd been at their age, angry, scared, desperate for approval. He thought about all the choices that had led him down a dark path, and all the choices that had led him back to the light. "Hi," he began. "My name is Vincent Costello, and I used to be a very bad man." The room was silent, attentive. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I hurt people. I broke laws. I built an empire on violence and fear. And for a long time, I thought that made me powerful. I thought that made me strong." He paused, meeting eyes around the room. "But I was wrong. Real strength isn't about how much fear you can inspire. It's about how you face your own fear. It's about the courage to admit you were wrong and the commitment to do better. And I'm here to tell you that no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter how far down the wrong path you've gone, it's never too late to turn around." He spoke for 30 minutes, answering questions, sharing stories, being honest about both his failures and his ongoing journey. When it was over, several kids came up to talk to him. One boy, maybe 16, with hard eyes that Vince recognized from his own past, asked, "Do you really believe people can change? Or is that just something you tell yourself?" Vince thought about Eleanor burning that list, about Sophia's email, about every small choice he'd made over the past year. "I believe it because I'm living it," Vince said. "Every single day is a choice, and I choose to be better than I was yesterday. That's all any of us can do." The boy nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. Maybe hope. Maybe just the beginning of possibility. As they left the community center, snow beginning to fall in soft flurries, Eleanor squeezed Vince's hand. "You did good in there." "We did good," Vince corrected. "None of this happens without you. You're the one doing the work. But you're the reason I started." They walked through the snowy streets, past the brownstone where it all began, past the Velvet Room, now a trendy nightclub with no connection to Vince's past, past the life he'd left behind. Vince pulled Elena close, and they stood there in the falling snow, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and chose to walk toward the light together. "Thank you," Vince said softly. "For what? For seeing me, for believing in me, for not letting me stay in that burning building." Elena smiled, reaching up to brush snow from his hair. "That's what love does. It pulls you out of the fire, and then it helps you rebuild." They kissed as the snow fell around them. Chicago's streets quiet and peaceful. Somewhere in the city, Sophia was probably with David, planning their future. Marco was likely studying for finals, building his own dreams. Agent Chen was closing cases, making the city safer. And in a community center, a 16-year-old boy with hard eyes was thinking about choices and second chances. The world kept turning. Lives kept changing. And two people who'd started as a mob boss and a waitress had become something neither of them expected. Partners in redemption, builders of a better tomorrow, proof that it's never too late to choose differently. Vincent Costello had spent 30 years being a monster, but with Elena's help, he'd discovered what he'd always been underneath. Just a man. Flawed, broken, but capable of change. And that, Elena thought as they walked home through the snow, was the most beautiful kind of miracle. The kind you create one choice at a time.